Confused about strength training? Do you wish someone would just lay out an easy to follow blueprint? Our guest today has done just that. On episode 731 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Cori Lefkowith and discuss her book, The Strong System. Transform your mindset and build your best body at any age. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of The Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Allan. Really glad you're here. We've got a great episode today, particularly if you like talking about strength training. So we'll just go ahead and get right on into it. Our guest today is the founder of Redefining Strength, an innovative online fitness company dedicated to helping individuals redefine strength on their own terms, empowering them to live their healthiest, happiest lives at every age. She believes that age is just a number, but choosing strength is a mindset. She is passionate about cutting through fad diets and quick fixes to guide people in building personalized, sustainable fitness and nutrition plans that evolve with their changing goals and needs. Her expert training methods have been featured in Women's Health, Live Strong, Self, Mind Body Green, Well and Good, The Guardian, and more. With no further ado, here's Cori Lefkowith. Cori, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So your book is called The Strong System, Transform Your Mindset and Build Your Best Body at Any Age. A great promise. Harder said than done.
Definitely harder said than done. And I would argue it's that way with every result we want. And if we don't own that negative and don't own the challenges ahead, that's often what sabotages our results.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. The other thing that I thought was just interesting is that just some of the things you say are just hilarious. Flying fart in space and things like that. I'm like, oh my gosh. She wrote this like she was talking to a friend, and I can really appreciate that. You shared a lot of yourself and the journey you've taken, some of your clients have taken, and the pictures in the book to demonstrate all the exercises. You're wearing the same outfit in all of the pictures, but I cannot believe that you did all of those in one day, let alone 1 month.
Well, I did, and it was a very long day, and I was very bruised up after because in order to take the pictures, I had to be on a surface I wasn't expecting to be on. So it was on the gym rubber mats versus the soft mats I had planned to do it on, but they're all in one day. And I like to talk to people the way I talk to myself and be unapologetically myself. And I want to encourage everybody else to be the same way.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. When I'm reading a book, to feel like I'm actually talking to the author, which now I'm talking to the author.
Well, there may or may not be any flying farts in space said today.
There may not, but I'm sure you're going to come up with some, because I'm going to share another thing that you said that I thought was quite fitting. Now, the first thing I want to get into, because so many health and fitness books do this, and you did not. And that was they jump right into the tactics. Now, they may also describe why the tactics work while they're teaching you the tactic, but you took those steps back that I think are really necessary for this trip, and you started talking about mindset and setting yourself for this, because like you'd said, this is not going to be easy, But it's not as hard as a lot of people would think if you get yourself right.
It truly is an issue of alignment. And so often we're hit with new tools, new tactics, but we never assess who's giving those to us and why they're giving them to us. And so ultimately, we can keep ourselves very stuck trying to do more. And it's only when we realize where we're actually starting from, what our lifestyle looks like, and what we want it to look like, that we can move forward. Because making changes is about shifting our identity. So I like to think of it as setting the GPS. You don't set your GPS only with the destination, because if you do that, then it's going to be like, well, how do I give you directions if I don't know where you're starting? Yet that's really what we do when we look for another plan. We go after a destination with no recognition as to where we're starting from. So I think that starting with the mindset is how we get aligned with the actual actions we need to take to move forward towards our goals.
And you touched on something else that I think is really, really important. And I made this mistake in my book, and I apologize, and I'm going to keep apologizing for it. But I talked about what worked for me. And now, having coached thousands of people since that worked for me, I realized that doesn't work for everybody. And so my way of eating, my way of moving, my way of all of it was specifically designed for me. And I didn't really think that through. I just thought, okay, yes, if everybody does this, this is going to happen. And I've learned a lot since then. Can you talk a little bit about how we buy into these, for lack of a better word, dogmas, and why it happens so often, and what we can do about it on our side to make sure that we're not getting to that point?
It's easy to believe that a tool or tactic will fix everything, because that is what we've seen constantly repeated. And it's repeated by people who are well-intentioned. I did it starting out myself. Oh, I eat this way. This is the only way now to eat. I'm going to go preach doing it this way. And only as I even started to realize that what worked for me at one phase of my life, in one season of my year, didn't work for me at other times, did I begin to realize that there was so much more nuance to things. And that ultimately, as cliche as it is, we are what we believe we are. And so if I started to rebel against habits and tell myself, I can't do these things, I don't have the willpower, this doesn't work for me, I would stop doing them. And so through this recognition myself, I started to explore it with clients. And I tell my clients who started with me at the gym early on, I'm like, you're my guinea pigs. I'm testing these things out on you. But seeing their mindsets towards different habits like food tracking, it made me start to realize how much nuance there is to things, and that habits and the fundamentals of them can be done in so many different forms. So even taking something like food tracking that I might love and think of as a game of Tetris, someone else might dislike with a vengeance, and partly because of how they've used it in the past, which we can break down to help them embrace the mindsets behind it and shift those, but also make them recognize, hey, that's okay. But the real thing that matters here is that what gets measured gets managed. So if we can shape this habit now in a way that works for your lifestyle, you'll ultimately move forward. So it's really taking that step back to reflect. And I think that's a key component, which, as someone who is very much a doer and likes to just do, that reflection is the power to recognize, hey, I've constantly just jumped from tool to tool to tactic to tool to new strategy without really aligning with who and what I am. And if I step back to analyze that, that's how I can stop picking things that don't work for me. But it's also recognizing that even when you do pick something, nothing works forever.
In the book, you gave an analogy, and I love this analogy because when you say it out loud, you're like, that is ridiculous. There's no way I would do that. But it relates to how people will start something, and then they just, they have their screw up, the Friday night that they didn't intend to have, that then becomes the Saturday, becomes the Sunday, becomes the next week, becomes the next month, before they can recollect themselves. They're 5 pounds heavier and a lot less, happy, if you will. Can you go through that analogy and again, what it really represents?
This came off of what I called the one more game for myself, where I'd go get one piece of candy and then I'd be sitting there eating it, / sometimes not even make it back to the couch to eat it. And I'd be like, ooh, one more. And then I was like, ooh, one more. And all of a sudden I'd eaten 20 pieces of candy. And so I started to realize that this was like getting a flat tire, pulling over to the side of the road. And instead of being like, okay, let's fix it, let's put on the spare or call AAA if you don't know how to fix or put on the spare. Instead of doing that, what I was doing was slashing the other 3 tires. And sometimes not only slashing the other 3 tires, but literally lighting the car on fire and then just walking away. Just because I'd had one more piece of candy than I had thought I should have, or like what I felt guilty doing, basically. So it's something where you have one little deviation. And instead of just moving forward, owning the blip, saying, hey, even why did this happen so I don't repeat this in the future? Or just saying, hey, I'm human, this happened and it's not that bad. It's still, a great improvement. We go make things worse. We dig ourselves a hole we have to crawl out of. So I call it the flat tire analogy, where you get that flat tire and you would never go slash the other 3, but that's exactly what we do with our diet and workouts.
Now, how would we recognize that we've got the sharp instrument in our hand and we're approaching the other tires? Because sometimes you're already into, well into the screw up and then the starting of the slashing before you even realize that you're still slashing tires.
It's honestly hard. And a lot of it takes finding ways to make yourself pause and even recognizing the emotions that are there beforehand. So I know now if I have a stressful day, that I might have to shift my environment a little bit, because we just allow our environment to flow into unconscious habits. If you think about how you get home after a stressful day of work, you probably put your bag down in the same place. You take off your shoes in the same way. You walk to the cabinet in the same order that you've always done. And then you grab the same comfort food that you always grab and walk back to the couch and have eaten more of it than you expected by that time. So a shift in your environment is really key if you know you've had a stressful day. So recognizing that, but really it's just the power of the pause whenever you can. And sometimes starting out, that is after we've legitimately lit the car on fire and walked away. But the first opportunity you get to assess what happened, what you could do in the future, will really help. So maybe it is saying, hey, on a stressful day, I'm going to go for a walk instead of going in the front door. And that will help. Or, hey, if I do recognize myself going to the cabinet, the next time I'm tempted to walk back to the cabinet, grab some water. But it's finding those ways to shift your environment. It's finding those ways to pause. And it's a difficult process. And even once you recognize it, there are going to be times, despite knowing that knife is on the passenger seat and you can grab it and you shouldn't, you're going to grab it anyway. So it's giving yourself that grace when that does happen, to always pause and reflect as soon as you can.
Yeah, I think the grace is a key word there, because I had a client and she was an attorney, and we started talking about her environment, her lifestyle, what was going on. And it was every day she'd get off from a, hectic day at work. She would get the mail. She would walk to the kitchen counter and she'd be reading her mail and then pouring herself a glass of wine. And that was like a daily, it was a clockwork, it's like you brush your teeth every day. That first glass of wine while she was opening the mail. And so I told her, I said, okay, well, here's what you can't do. You can't read the mail in the kitchen. Okay, you've got to go to the living room and sit there. Don't pour the glass of wine. Just go straight to the living room and open them, sit down if you need to, and then just read the mail right there. And she started doing that. But I said, but the most important part of this is not just that you recognize that there's a problem and that you figure out why it's a problem and that you do something about it, but you've got to forgive yourself, because if you keep punishing yourself for the sins of the past, they're always going to be there in the back of your mind. So, if you're slashing your tires, don't have a sharp instrument on the seat of the passenger seat car. It's just don't even have it in the car. But you've got to forgive yourself and get it out first, or you won't have that opportunity, or you're going to fail a lot more often than you'd like.
And that's why I started with mindset. And I started with what I even call the beastet or beast origin story, because assessing our current lifestyle is so key, because we can do that proactively to recognize, okay, what does my average day look like? Am I coming home, reading my mail in the kitchen and pouring that glass of wine and repeating a pattern that I don't like? Because then that begins the process of unlearning. And I say unlearning because I think so often we just think of habits as something we need to learn. I need to learn a new habit. Okay, but what do you have to unlearn first to allow that habit to be learned? And it's what I use as an analogy is like clearing the field. You can't plant in a field that's overgrown with weeds. You've got to clear the field. You've got to make sure the soil is ready. And some of those weeds there have very deep roots that we have to recognize. And so we're going to repeat those patterns despite even knowing they're there and trying to have cleared them away. But once you clear that field, you started the unlearning process, and then you can begin to plant new habits. You can learn those new habits. But that unlearning, it's tough. And part of why it was easier to learn new habits when we were younger is because there wasn't that unlearning. So the more we can give ourselves grace and realize, hey, this shows me that something else is going on. I need to reassess where I'm actually starting from, but then also the habits that you're implementing. Because if you're repeating the same old pattern, where are you feeling that pain pushback more than you can handle right now? And how can you break down that habit more to make the process of learning it easier?
Yeah. Now, the STRONG system, STRONG is actually an acronym. Could you take us through that and what that means?
Yeah, so it's significant, targeted, repeatable, optimized, non-negotiable, and go. And go is honestly the most important part because nothing changes if nothing changes. Yeah. But if you don't do that assessment first, you don't know what to take action on that will actually drive you forward. And while this is a plan or system, I like Eisenhower's quote of, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And part of why the system works is because with that action, it's not just action for the sake of action, it's action with reflection. And there's a constant refocusing back on the system and doing the assessment. So with the S, with significant, what you're really trying to do is understand the value of your goals. And so often, we actually downplay our goals, give ourselves all these reasons not to invest in ourselves or really commit the time and energy to do the things. Oh, it's just 5 pounds. Oh, it's not that important, until it's so important that we can't ignore it and it's a health concern. But understanding the significance of our goals, and even goals we deem vain or silly, is super important. And for me, that was recognizing that I wanted abs. And part of the reason I had never worked towards getting that definition was that I didn't prioritize myself. I didn't want to push myself outside my comfort zone. And once I did, the confidence I built, all the perspective I got, like the experience of the journey is often where the value really is. And so if you're saying, oh, it's just 5 pounds, but you're always prioritizing everybody else in your life, maybe prioritizing yourself is what you need to feel more confident, show up better for everybody else in your life. And you don't know where the snowball is going to lead. So it's really starting with why that goal is significant for you. And then from there, you're going to pick targets to hit. And I call these targets because goals can have this connotation of like they're very set in stone. They have to be these very specific measurable things done in this very specific way. But targets give us just a direction to drive in. And direction really does drive us. So we need to know where we're going because you have to set that GPS, but we've got to have some flexibility to it, which goes back to Eisenhower's, the planning is indispensable, right? Because we have to be able to say, okay, I'm prepared for the journey ahead. I have actions I'm going to take, but I'm okay with reassessing. And so with targets, you're setting not only your main goal and breaking down your main goal, but you're also setting things that complement it, that help you do the habits. Because the more ways we measure success, the more ways we have to be successful and keep ourselves moving forward towards what I call checkpoints over end dates, just because we're checking in. We can't control how fast results happen, right?
Yeah. This reminds me when the way I like to think about it is I was driving in Colorado and the road was just straight, just forever. And because the mountains were there, the mountains just felt like they were moving with me. Everything felt like it was moving with me, like I was sitting still. And it was aggravating knowing that I had hundreds and hundreds of miles to drive, but didn't feel like I was moving until I started focusing on the mile markers. And because I was going slightly more than 60 miles per hour, those were coming by less than a minute apart. And they all had a number on them and they were all moving. And so I think that's the idea here, is that if you have something you're somewhat focused on, I wasn't focused on the signs, but I wanted to use the signs as evidence that I wasn't sitting still, because nothing else around me seemed to be moving. The mountains were like literally felt like they were moving with me. And so this was just one way as I was trying to get through Colorado that I was like, okay, just focus on these signs. You're seeing the number get smaller. You're moving closer to your end target, which is the big thing, which was getting the hell out of Colorado and into the next state to get where I was going. But it was just one of those interesting moments in my life where I realized, okay, you've got to focus on something other than the big trip if you really want to keep feeling like you're making progress. I knew I was making progress. I could see the speedometer. I could see, I knew I was moving, but seeing those signs it just made me feel better every time that number got smaller.
And it makes you realize you're not driving really fast in the wrong direction too.
Yeah.
It's the reason we want to measure the habits. But like when we think about measuring habits, it's like, okay, I logged my food today. I did this today. But when you can see your strength go up in the gym, or you can see yourself making new foods and, improving your blood markers, all those things are showing you that you're doing the right habits to have other goals pay off. And sometimes it's even watching weight loss because you have a performance goal in another way and you need to make weight for it. So there's a lot of different ways to measure success, but the more ways we measure it, the more ways we can really see things are paying off to make sure that we can trust the process enough for it to like snowball and build.
Okay. And so the next one is repeatable?
Yes. So this comes back to how often do we do habits that really aren't repeatable for a very long time? And if you think about self-control as a gas tank, we're basically depleting our self-control just to repeat them daily. And so we need to recognize what habits are sort of costing us. How hard are they to repeat? And I think about it as different sized rocks. And you have this bag and you have to carry the rocks across the field. And you have some big habit rocks that are very heavy. These are habits that are really hard to do that we kind of don't want to lift up and we resist as much as possible. And then they go down in size to very small pebbles. And those you can carry more across at once. However, when you carry those across, results aren't going to happen as fast. So it's kind of weighing the cost and reward of all the habits that we have. So how much we're going to have to put time and energy and self-control into doing them, how much we feel that mental resistance even building against them, and then how much we know we can still commit no matter what, but how much we also know that that's going to sabotage us into something not repeatable. And that's where we have to say, okay, I might need to make 1% changes. So when you're starting your journey, you have to assess, how significant is this? How much am I willing to sacrifice? Which is why that S is so important to start everything. What are my targets and how far away are they? How much time am I willing to commit to get there? And that's where you can assess what's repeatable for me based on the speed at which I want to see results, based on the sacrifices I'm willing to make. And so you might feel that tracking is best for you, tracking your macros precisely, but you hate it and you don't want to do it. And it's giving you a bad taste in your mouth from previous experiences. So if you try to force yourself to track, that might be the thing that's like a boulder in your path and you're pushing against a boulder that's not going to move right now. And so by doing that, you're going to waste all this time and energy with something that doesn't build any results. However, instead, if you take a look at your diet and say, hey, it feels really doable to add protein to one more meal, that might be the thing that builds momentum, because we think we have to wait for motivation, but motivation and momentum are built through action. So really with repeatable, it's about finding the habits that you can do right now that allow you to embrace more habits over time and build that new identity, because you are stepping into a new person with a new lifestyle.
And I think there are ways to make things repeatable, at least, in the near term, that may not otherwise be as easy to repeat. For example, one of the things I found that worked really well for me was once I kind of have my macros or whatever nailed down, well, that becomes the template. And so, because I like that food, I have no problem eating that food most times. So it makes a meal really easy to record again because, okay, it's the same meal I had maybe last night or I had on Sunday. And so it's just, okay, there it is again. And so you kind of, once you get going, if you're okay with not having a new food every day, you can actually make some of these habits easier, which makes them more repeatable.
But you met yourself where you are right now and what you feel you need, what you value even. For somebody else, that idea of repeating the same meals might be like, I will never stick to that diet. I have, busy moms, people cooking for families who are like, I need to make a meal my family will also enjoy. And I've always been forced on a diet that doesn't allow me to do that. So we build their macros back around those meals. We plan those meals in first, which I'll get to at the end is part of their non-negotiables. But it is about assessing who and what you are to find what habits truly feel repeatable and the forms in which you can do them, also owning that it might change at different times of year. Like I know I would sabotage myself every single holiday season because during the summer, I wouldn't need to track. I'd be in a good groove from the new year. I would be hitting, my portions. I sort of knew what they looked like. I was staying very active over the summer. All of a sudden, the holiday season, I'd be like, oh, I still don't need to track. And all of the cookies would sneak in. Oh, I'm not being that bad. The habits didn't work. So I had to go back to tracking, and I set minimums different than what I did in January where I followed full ratios, but I assessed what habits felt repeatable for that season of life. And that's where you really get into that O and the optimized.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into optimized.
So you have to oversell the negative and own your past struggles if you want to optimize your habits to meet you where you are. And I know a lot of times we like to run from our failures, be like, oh, that happened. Okay, let's just move on. But you have to reflect on them because they teach you so much. They're great feedback and learning experiences just with the side of frustration. And the more we own that and own our reality and own who and what we are and what has and hasn't worked for us in the past, the more we can make those 1% improvements and changes that build that momentum and create that new identity. So when you're really thinking about optimizing, you're thinking about what hasn't worked and why hasn't it worked? Not just like, oh, I did keto and I like carbs. Okay, well, have you done another diet that cut out another food group that you wanted to include eventually? And by doing that, you sabotage yourself. Have you seen changes with different times of year where you always fall off? How can you really optimize around your lifestyle and get your habits in alignment with that to move forward? And that's where N comes into play with owning your non-negotiables as well. I mean, for me, I love dessert. And cutting it out every single time was what I went to first because, ice cream and a big bowl of it is not that healthy for you. It's an easy calorie cut to see results. But every single time I would go back to it and be like, I want ice cream. It's why I would then have ice cream, feel like I fell off, and I get the flat tire and slash the other 3.
Yeah, this purple elephant, don't think of a purple elephant and boom, there you are. So if you're telling yourself, okay, you can never have ice cream until you reach this goal, then you're going to want ice cream a lot more.
It's why scrolling social media at points, if you follow food pages, can be very dangerous. And you see the ooey gooey chocolate chip cookies and you're like, I didn't even care about chocolate chip cookies before, and now I want them. Same thing happens with our diet. So the more we own what's non-negotiable for us, be it, dessert, be it family meals, be it margaritas with the girls on Friday night, whatever it is, the more we own those things and plan around them to start and sort of go after the low-hanging fruit, the 1% changes that feel so silly simple, we could do them like right now listening to this podcast, the better off we're going to be. And then we can even start to make things that we really want to implement non-negotiable by putting them first in our day, connecting them with other habits. But we've got to own what's important to us because one size doesn't fit all. And we hear that all the time as people push exact tactics and tools and say, just do this to reach this goal. It goes back to, you got to set that GPS, own where you are, and even recognize there might be, delays and closures and different things that pop up along your journey, but your GPS will reroute you around as long as you sort of own, these are the non-negotiable things for me so that I can get to my destination.
And then, of course, go.
Nothing changes if nothing changes. If you don't take action, you will never move forward.
Now, you were heavy, and I liked that you were heavy on this, because so many people will just, they'll sit down at the beginning and they'll think about their lives and the struggles they've had and all the things, the reflections. And then they have a picture, a snapshot of like, okay, here's what I'm going to do and here's how I'm going to do it. And then they charge on. It's not common for people to continue that process of reflection throughout the whole journey. But you're pretty heavy on this as an absolute. We have to do this.
We learn more in the reflection than in the doing. And so often we wonder, how do I trust the process? How do I know if it's working? That's all reflection and the power of reflection. And with this, when you constantly reflect, and I even say do it weekly, sit down before your next week, assess what's coming up. Before the holidays, assess what's coming up. Before January pops around, you're really motivated, assess how you've always done things. The more you reflect, the more you can constantly meet yourself where you are, because nothing works forever. your mindsets aren't the same. And I like to think of it as like all stress going in one bucket. You have all these different things in life pouring into you. You have family obligations, work stressors, and then if you add on diet and workout changes, these are all dumping into the bucket. And you don't want the bucket to overflow. So there is a valve to release it. But so often we don't recognize when there's been more work stresses or family obligations. And so we just think, oh, my habits are making me overflow with stress right now. Like the new healthy habits I'm trying to implement, when really it's these other factors that are starting to spill in a little bit more and make that overflow happen. So that's where we get the other three tires, where we start poking holes in the bucket to try and release pressure any way we can, or we turn off the valves of the new healthy habits instead of recognizing, no, I have control. I can actually sort of, go to minimalist macros, make some easier changes, go from 6 workouts a week to 3. We can adjust our habits to meet us where we are based on the other stressors. Again, it goes back to that alignment, aligning with where your life is now and your values and what you prioritize. So I think reflection is the biggest superpower that we don't use. And it's why we keep going on diet after diet after diet, just searching for a new tool or tactic with no thought as to why the other ones didn't work.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people, because there's been so much stress on the concept of calories in, calories out as a model for weight loss, most people will think, okay, I just need to be a cardio bunny. And, you'll see them in January. They're in there now, but they'll start falling off pretty soon here, is that they come in and they find that first piece of cardio equipment near the door of the gym. They're always at the door. So, they know you're not going to go any deeper. You're going to stop there. You're going to find your favorite piece of cardio equipment, and then you're going to go. That's what you're going to do. And we know that if you've owned a gym, you know that is just put the cardio equipment closest to the door so they don't have to walk all the way through the gym to get to their cardio equipment, but they'll all be gone in 3 weeks when they don't get the results. In the book, you talked about the strength cardio continuum. And for what we're trying to do here with body recomp and losing weight and all of that, why is it important for us to understand this and how does it work?
So I always ask clients, when they say, I've lost weight in the past doing this, because most of us have done multiple attempts to try and reach our goals. And I'll ask them what they've done. And they'll say, well, I've turned to cardio. I've lost the weight. It worked. That's where I push back a little bit and say, did it work? Because that cardio bunny attitude, and I've been guilty of it. I did spin like it was popping M&Ms in my mouth at one point and just kept going with it and didn't value the weights the way I should. But when we think about what worked, we have to recognize it didn't work. It worked short term, but put us on this vicious cycle where we regain the weight and potentially even more and feel like now our age, our metabolism, everything's broken. And so we have to recognize that there is this whole continuum from cardio to strength workouts. And when we think about it and the ends of each spectrum, it's the steady state endurance running on one side, and then it's the 1 rep powerlifting max type workouts on the other side. But there's this whole continuum we can work along to help us build lean muscle, fuel our metabolic health, also improve our cardiovascular conditioning. But there's so many different energy systems we really want to work. And it's thinking long-term, not just valuing our workouts for the calories burned. That's why we tend towards the cardio. Not to mention, we think, okay, yes, more calories burned per session. This worked in the past. I've been told to do this. That it's also the heart health benefits because you don't want to ignore cardio. But we need to move along that continuum to really include that strength work, because muscle is metabolically magical. Muscle is magical for our health, for our body recomp. We can lose weight, yes, by calories in versus calories out, but that's also why we can feel like we regain the weight easier and easier when we rebound back up. We're trying to out exercise our diet. We're also losing muscle and seeing our metabolic rate slow. And as we get older, we add to that unideal hormone levels, and we add to that, more slightly poopy dieting practices and other training practices, which only sabotage us more. So we're blaming our age when the hormone levels aren't there, when we do see the other changes with age. So it's recognizing how important it is to use that continuum to our advantage to match what we need, even when we set other complementary goals in terms of building strength or wanting to PR in something.
Yeah, and that's what I liked in the book was then when you gave us different workout regimens and timing and reps and sets and everything. And then you started demonstrating all of those exercises, hundreds of pages of exercises. So it's really, really solid. But you align these on that continuum. So someone knows, okay, this is when you're working focused mostly on strength. These are going to be, the workouts, the way you'll do them. But most of the exercises, many of the exercises apply to all of those continuums, all of those different exercises across the continuum.
And things that we consider cardio can build strength, and things that we consider strength can be cardio. It's all based on the workout design, the reps and the rest, and the intervals of work that we do. So like if you think about sprinting, that's a very different form of cardio than endurance steady state. And even endurance steady state running is different than the benefits you'll see from walking. And the more we value the nuance in these things, the more we can tailor everything to match our needs and goals. And that's where like workout design, I think, is so undervalued. And we just think, oh, well, if I do 3 sets of 12, I'm working in the hypertrophy rep range, I'm going to build some muscle. This is simple. Yes, that's good. And that might be what you start with. And I'm not knocking body part splits in the slightest. They work fabulously. But we also then have to own the time we have. And all that comes back where you work on that continuum to your schedule and owning the reality of the work that you've done with the other part of strong. Because if you haven't owned and assessed your lifestyle, you could be trying to force 6 workouts a week when you realistically have time for 3. And how you design those 3 workouts, they can work, but you need to design for the actual time you have.
So, Cori, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
This really brought me back to our habit budget, so to speak, where every habit we do comes with a cost to us. It's time, energy, money. And we have to think about what we're putting into our savings to be able to spend on especially habit changes that might be hard. And so everything is sort of balancing that checkbook, so to speak. So when I think about like tools, tactics, strategies to help us balance that checkbook so we can keep moving forward and maintain these habits for life, it really comes back to first owning those non-negotiables. The more you recognize what you value and even how those values shift, the more you can always plan around them. Even to start a week, okay, what do I want to make non-negotiable this week that I'll do no matter what? And how can I make sure I prioritize that? So that first reflection. Then focus on 1% improvements. The more you say, hey, how can I just be better this week than I was last week? How can I be better today than I was yesterday? Those 1% improvements, those silly, simple habits we often write off can be the biggest payoff. And it might be just taking, a sip more water when you're making your coffee. But then the third thing is connecting all these to your environment and to something you're already doing that allow you to build. So in the example of drinking more water, maybe you put your water bottle out by your coffee machine. So it's really thinking, what are my non-negotiables? How can I make 1% changes and improvements off of what I'm currently doing? And then how can I connect these to my environment or to something I already enjoy so that I'm more likely to do them?
Thank you. Cori, if someone wanted to learn more about you, learn more about your book, The Strong System, where would you like for me to send them?
redefiningstrength.com/book. And I have thousands of other resources to help out. I really want you to meet yourself where you are to move forward.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with Dan John to discuss training as we age. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.